If I told you an agency doubled its content output, hit every single project deadline for, I don't know, 6 months straight, and cut its operating costs by 30%, you would probably say they won the game.
Right, you'd think they figured it out.
Exactly. You look at their internal dashboard, and it is just, well, you'd think it's the absolute peak of modern efficiency.
Yeah.
It's the exact promise that every, productivity thread and tech evangelist has been selling for the last 2 years. So why are their best, longest tenured clients quietly firing them?
Because the metrics of efficiency have entirely decoupled from the metrics of value.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, we're looking at a scenario where the operational machine is, flawless, but the actual service being rendered has come completely hollow.
Right.
The dashboard is green across the board. I mean, there are no angry emails, there are no missed deliverables, no obvious formatting errors.
The baseline quality of the work is actually remarkably high.
Exactly. It's really high. But then 3 major accounts just politely decline to renew their retainers. And they offer nothing but this vague note about going in a different direction.
Which is infinitely more terrifying than a client screaming at you over a typo.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if someone complains about a typo, you can just fire the copy editors, right? You fix the workflow, you save the account, you have a tangible problem to solve.
Yeah, a typo is a known error.
Right. But this polite, quiet departure, this sort of slow bleed of revenue is just baffling. Because if the output is technically flawless and the volume is way up, why aren't clients thrilled?
They aren't thrilled because, well, they aren't stupid.
Fair point.
We really have to look at what a client is actually paying for in a high-end service arrangement. In the past, simply generating coherent, professional-sounding output that required significant human labor.
The friction was just higher.
The friction of creation was massive. So when an agency delivered a 50-page strategic report, or say, a month's worth of polished marketing assets, the sheer existence of that coherent output was proof of work.
It showed they actually did something.
Right, it demonstrated competence. But now, the baseline quality of generated output, the grammar, the formatting, the basic logical flow, it's incredibly high. And it's essentially free.
So the floor has basically been raised.
The floor has been raised so high that it is bumping into the ceiling.
Wow.
So the client reads the agency's new hyper-efficient output and they think, this is fine.
It reads perfectly well.
Yeah, it makes logical sense. But fine is not indispensable. Fine is commoditized. When you produce something perfectly polished but fundamentally generic, you aren't offending the client.
You're just not wowing them either.
You're giving them absolutely no reason to continue paying a premium. I mean, they look at this polished sameness and realize they could generate the exact same median consensus internally for like $20 a month.
But wait, if I am that agency owner, my immediate counterargument is pricing.
Sure.
Right? Because if I have slashed my operational costs by leveraging these tools and my team is producing twice the volume in half the time, why wouldn't I just lower my retainer fees?
You could.
If the client realizes the output is commoditized, fine, I'll just compete on volume and price. I'll become the most efficient commodity broker in the market. Why doesn't that work?
I mean, you can certainly try that, but you are entering a race to the bottom where the floor is literally zero.
Right. Because you can't beat a machine on cost.
Exactly. You cannot outcompete a machine on the cost of generation. If your core value proposition becomes, we generate acceptable content faster and cheaper, you are no longer an agency. You're just a low-margin API wrapper with human overhead.
Ouch.
And the erosion of trust happens because the client hired you for judgment, not generation.
That's a huge distinction. Judgment, not generation.
They hired you to understand the specific idiosyncratic risks of their business. So when they receive a perfectly optimized AI-generated strategy document, they can intuitively sense that no human being wrestled with those ideas.
Like nobody actually sat there and agonized over the trade-offs.
Exactly. The friction of deep thought is missing. And without that friction, there is no trust.
It feels like removing the friction also removes the spark. And I want to look at how this plays out for the individual operator, because the sources we're diving into show this exact same hollow success pattern happening in personal branding and audience building too.
Oh, it's everywhere.
Yeah. There's this example of a B2B consultant. She used to write 3 or 4 posts a week manually, and it was a total grind.
Right, staring at a blank screen.
Exactly. Drafting, deleting, second-guessing her phrasing. But the replies she received were deep.
Because the thought was deep.
Right. Her direct messages were from founders saying things like, "We hit this exact bottleneck in our logistics pipeline last Tuesday. How would you structure the reorg?
Those are the messages you want.
Yeah, those specific, vulnerable conversations turned into high-ticket consulting contracts.
Because there was a direct, undeniable line of intent from the content to the business outcome, the friction of her writing process forced her to inject her unique, hard-won expertise into the text.
But then, and this is where it goes sideways, she optimizes her workflow.
Right.
She starts batching 20 posts a week
Yeah.
using AI. And the metrics tell her she is an absolute genius.
Oh, the metrics always lie at first.
Yeah, the algorithm rewards the volume. It rewards the perfectly optimized hooks. Her engagement rate completely spikes. The raw number of likes and comments goes through the roof.
And her inbound leads drop to zero.
Completely vanish. Just gone. And the comments she does get, they shift from those highly specific business problems to these vague, empty platitudes.
Like, great perspective.
Yeah, or thanks for sharing this value. Just 100 people saying that. Nobody is sliding into her DMs to ask for help with the logistics bottleneck anymore. There is absolutely zero intent to buy.
We really have to unpack the mechanism of in this new environment.
What do you mean?
Well, when output becomes this cheap to generate, the very thing people respond to shifts away from the output itself. The consultant's new posts, they're technically flawless.
They look like perfect posts.
Right. They have the optimal hook-to-body copy ratio, the spacing is perfect, but they are entirely interchangeable with 10,000 other B2B posts published in that exact same hour.
So people just scroll right past.
The audience scrolls past, their brain recognizes the visual pattern of a quote-unquote professional insight, and they tap the like button out of sheer habit or just mild passive agreement.
And they just keep scrolling.
They keep scrolling. They do not pause. They don't experience that jarring moment of resonance where they think, wow, this person has been inside my head.
You know, I think of it like a wax meal.
A wax meal.
Yeah, like you see a beautifully styled, perfectly photographed plate of food in a magazine or something. It has the shape of food. It has the color of food.
Right.
And the platform's algorithm looks at it and says, yes, this matches the parameters of a highly engaging meal. Let's serve it to 1 million people. But when the audience actually tries to consume it, there is zero nutritional value.
That's a great way to put it.
They aren't digesting anything real. They aren't being nourished. So they walk away starving, and they certainly aren't going to ask the chef to cater their wedding.
The algorithm is fed, but the audience is starving. That captures the dynamic perfectly.
It's just empty calories.
Exactly, because the algorithm optimizes for pattern recognition, while human trust requires pattern disruption.
Oh, that's interesting. Pattern disruption.
Yeah. And we see this exact architecture of failure with established creators, too. The material details a creator with 60,000 followers. His views haven't dropped. In fact, because he is testing more variations and publishing more frequently, his top-of-funnel metrics are better than ever.
But the business side isn't matching up.
Not at all. His product sales have stalled entirely. His email list growth, which is really the ultimate proxy for high-intent trust, has flatlined. The phrase used in the analysis is that his audience feels tangibly thinner.
A thinner audience. If your entire livelihood relies on the depth of the parasocial relationship you build with your followers, that is a terrifying diagnosis.
It'd be terrifying.
So what is the structural difference between a thick audience and a thin one? Like, how does that actually work?
It comes down to the concept of standard deviation in thought.
Okay, standard deviation. Explain that.
Well, large language models operate on probability. Their fundamental architecture is designed to predict the most likely, most statistically median next word based on their training data.
Right, they just guess what comes next based on the average.
By definition, they erase standard deviation. But standard deviation is exactly where a creator's unique personality, their authority, and their weirdness actually live.
It's the quirks.
Yes. A thick audience is built when a creator makes connections that are slightly off-center connections that only their specific idiosyncratic brain would make. A thin audience, on the other hand, is highly transactional.
They're just consuming the content as passive entertainment.
Exactly. When a creator starts relying heavily on generated output to maintain volume, they systematically sand down their own edges. They sound like a slightly more polished version of the median consensus of the internet.
And why would I buy a course or join an email list to get the median consensus of the internet when I can just generate it myself for free?
You win.
You haven't demonstrated that your mind is capable of doing anything my software can't do?
You have literally commoditized your own worldview.
Okay, I get how this destroys marketing and audience building. Marketing requires a soul. It requires that idiosyncratic weirdness you're talking about. But surely this doesn't play to hard logic.
You'd think so.
Right. Like math is math, logic is logic. If an AI writes a flawless Python script, there's no spark or soul missing. It either compiles or it doesn't. So why are we seeing this exact same rot happening in purely technical fields?
Because this is where the illusion of efficiency becomes actively dangerous.
Hmm.
The same hollow success pattern is tearing through software engineering, but it manifests differently.
How so?
Well, the sources highlight a scenario involving a senior engineer who's managing a team of junior developers.
Okay.
And these junior devs are relying heavily on AI to write code and push new features. Now, the surface metrics look incredible. The junior devs are submitting massive pull requests.
And the code is probably clean, right?
Pristine. It adheres to all the styling guidelines, it's fully commented, the documentation is generated alongside it. On paper, this development team is operating at 10 times their previous velocity.
But, there's a but.
There is a massive but. The senior developer is quietly staying up until 2 in the morning, manually refactoring the entire code base. And the crucial detail here is that the junior developer's code isn't broken. If you run it, it executes. It passes all the unit tests.
So why is the senior engineer tearing their hair out at 2 a.m.?
Because of the massive hidden mismatch between perceived productivity and actual maintainability.
Perceived productivity versus maintainability.
Right. We have to look at what a code base actually is. It is not just a collection of instructions for a computer. It is a mental model shared by the engineering team.
Like a map of the system.
Exactly. When you handwrite complex code, even if it takes you weeks, you build an internal map of the architecture. You know exactly why you made specific trade-offs. You know where the fragile points are. You understand the unspoken business logic that governs how the system should scale in 3 years.
You essentially hold the state of the application in your head.
You own the logic.
Right.
But when a junior developer uses an AI to generate 1,000 lines of code, the AI solves for the immediate prompt. It provides a plausible, functioning solution for that specific, isolated task.
But it doesn't know the bigger picture.
The AI does not have a holistic understanding of the 5-year vision of the software. It doesn't understand the nuanced constraints of the broader system. And the junior developer didn't write the code, so they don't understand it either.
They just saw that it worked and pushed it.
They simply verified that it worked in the moment and pushed it to the main branch.
So you end up with a sort of compounding technical debt. And the system doesn't break instantly with a massive crash. It just gets heavier. Every new feature introduces this unearned complexity.
Unearned complexity is the perfect term. The code works, but no human being actually understands how or why it works in the context of the larger architecture.
Which is terrifying if you think about it.
It is, because 6 months later, when a critical bug surfaces in the billing module, nobody can fix it. The junior developer who, quote-unquote, wrote it doesn't know how it functions. And the AI that generated it doesn't have the context of all the changes made since.
So you're just stuck.
Every subsequent update takes exponentially longer because the team is wading through a swamp of hard logic that nobody truly owns. They are terrified to touch anything because they don't understand the foundational structure.
So the speed of generation up front creates a permanent drag on maintainability on the back end.
Precisely.
Okay, so we have the B2B marketer losing inbound leads, the creator staring at a massive but completely apathetic audience, and the senior developer buried under a mountain of heavy, brittle code.
Right.
On the surface, those are entirely different professions. The deliverables are different, the daily tasks are different. What is the actual invisible fracture connecting all of them?
The fracture is the widening gap between generating work and owning work.
Generating versus owning.
Yes. In every single one of these scenarios, the professional has outsourced the core cognitive heavy lifting. They have transitioned from being the originator of structured thought to acting as basically an editor of generated material.
Just reviewing what the machine spit out.
Right. And that gap between generating and owning starts off microscopically small. It is incredibly seductive. You tell yourself, I'm just overcoming the blank page.
Or I'm just getting a boilerplate template to speed things up.
Exactly. But the decay violently compounds.
Because the friction of the blank page isn't an obstacle to the work. It actually is the work.
Exactly. When you skip the messy, frustrating, agonizing process of staring at a broken piece of code or a blank document and forcing your brain to construct the logic from scratch, you bypass the only mechanism that creates deep understanding.
You're skipping the reps.
You're skipping the reps.
The sources introduce a term for this state of operation that I actually find fascinating. Information mode.
Yes.
They argue that AI operates flawlessly in information mode. It produces plausible, highly coherent content. but it fundamentally lacks the internal logic that makes decisions defensible.
Ah.
Let's dig into that distinction a bit. What is the trap of information mode?
The trap is mistaking coherence for insight.
Okay, coherence versus insight.
Information mode is pure pattern matching. An LLM ingests billions of parameters regarding what a B2B marketing post looks like or what a Python script looks like, and it generates a localized output that matches that pattern flawlessly.
So it looks right.
It is highly plausible. If you skim it quickly, your brain's own pattern recognition software fires and says, yes, this belongs in the category of professional work.
Right.
But plausibility is the absolute lowest bar for value. Value comes from defensible internal logic.
Okay, so what does defensible logic actually look like in practice? How do I know if I have it?
It looks like knowing exactly why a specific word was chosen over another. It means knowing why a certain variable was declared globally instead of locally, based on the unique, messy constraints of your specific business environment.
You actually have a reason for the thing you did.
Exactly. Defensible logic requires a stake in the outcome. AI cannot provide defensible logic because it has no stake, it has no context, and no lived experience. It is simply calculating the highest probability token sequence.
But here is my question. Why does defensible internal logic matter so much more right now than it did even, say, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, 2 years ago, people were spinning up generic SEO content farms, writing aggressively mediocre, coherent articles, and making absolute fortunes. Generating passable information used to be a highly lucrative skill. So why is the game suddenly different today?
Because the ecosystem always adapts to abundance.
Adapt to abundance.
Right. Audiences, clients, search engines, and social platforms have all rapidly adjusted their internal filters. 2 years ago, merely possessing well-formatted, coherent information was still somewhat of a differentiator.
Because it proved you put some effort in.
Right. It implied a baseline level of effort and resource expenditure. Now, coherence is infinite. It is free. It is instantaneous.
So it signals nothing.
Exactly. If you are a client paying an agency $10,000 a month, you know you aren't paying for the generation of coherent text. You are paying for judgment. You are paying for the agency's ability to defend their strategic choices against your specific business risks.
So when the client pushes back and asks, hey, why did we take this specific angle on the campaign? The agency stumbles.
They stumble because they don't know.
They don't have a deep philosophical answer because they didn't actually make the decision. The LLM made the decision based on median probability, and the agency just approved the formatting. And the client can smell that lack of conviction immediately.
They can absolutely smell it. They don't reward polished sameness anymore because polished sameness has zero market value.
This is where the human element gets really tragic to me. Because when we see our engagement drop or our leads dry up or our code base get messy, our natural instinct is to assume we're using the tool wrong.
Oh, always.
We think it's a technical failing on our part, like I must need a better prompt, I must be using the wrong model.
The instinct is always to apply a technical solution to a structural problem. When the B2B consultant sees her leads drop to zero, what does she do? She doesn't stop and reflect on the loss of her unique voice.
No, she doubles down on the automation.
Exactly. She buys a prompt engineering course. She starts building complex multi-agent workflows.
She discovers humanizer tools.
Oh, the humanizer tools.
This is the darkest, most absurd irony of this entire era. You use an AI to write your text, and then you pay a monthly subscription for a second AI to intentionally inject fake grammatical quirks, conversational filler, and simulated hesitation into the text so that it bypasses the AI detectors and tricks human beings into thinking you actually wrote it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is madness.
It is the ultimate false fix. Slapping a humanizer on AI output or writing a 5,000-word mega prompt or layering on more automation, these actions only address the surface aesthetics of the work.
They're just tweaking the presentation.
They do absolutely nothing to fix the underlying structural decay. You can refine the phrasing endlessly. You can prompt the AI to adopt the persona of a Fortune 500 CEO or a witty raconteur. But if the thinking behind the phrasing isn't sharp, tested, and deeply understood by you, it will still fundamentally read like something that lacks a soul.
It makes me think of putting a fresh, expensive coat of high-gloss paint on a house that has a crumbling foundation.
Yes.
From the street, driving by at 60 miles an hour, the house looks like $1 million. That's your audience scrolling past on LinkedIn.
Right.
But the moment someone actually walks inside, the moment a potential client tries to have a real unscripted conversation with you, about the ideas in that post-tellage, the floorboards immediately cave in.
They cave in because there's nothing holding them up.
Exactly. By automating these workflows with generic decisions, you aren't scaling your genius. You are just scaling your mediocrity much faster.
You are accelerating your own obsolescence. And this brings up the most urgent practical question for anyone listening.
Which is,
How do you diagnose this in yourself? Because the transition from doing the work to merely editing the work is incredibly subtle.
it sneaks up on you.
It really does. It is very easy to convince yourself that you are still the one driving the car and the AI is just the power steering.
The sources actually provide an incredibly clear, almost brutal methodology for diagnosing this. They call it the defense test.
I love this test.
It is a true litmus test for ownership. You take something you recently created, where you heavily utilized AI assistance. Maybe it's a client proposal, a blog post, a marketing strategy, or a piece of code. You look at the final output. You don't edit it. You don't tweak it to make yourself feel better.
Right. You have to look at the raw document.
You look at the raw document and ask yourself one single question. Can I defend every single claim in this document without looking back at the tool?
It is a devastating filter.
It really is.
Because it instantly strips away the illusion of competence. Imagine there is a paragraph in that proposal detailing a specific shift in consumer behavior. You read it and think, wow, that sounds incredibly insightful.
Like, man, I'm smart.
Right. But if a client stopped you on a live Zoom call and said, hey, fascinating point about the shift in consumer behavior, what underlying data led you to that conclusion?
Could you answer them?
Could you answer them? If you would freeze or if you would have to frantically check your prompt history to see where the AI pulled that idea from, then you do not own that work.
You are a passenger. And the test isn't, can I rewrite this to sound better? The test is actual defense. If a peer points to a specific sentence and says, why this, and not the alternative, do you have a deeply held, logically sound reason for why that sentence exists?
There is a second layer to this diagnostic, too, which the material refers to as the live conversation filter.
Okay, what's that?
This shifts the focus from logical defense to authentic voice.
Yeah.
You strip the AI output down to its core claims. You remove the fancy adjectives, the structured bullet points, and the professional gloss.
Take off all the makeup.
Exactly. Then you ask yourself, would I actually say these words out loud in a live conversation with an intelligent peer who has the ability to actively question my premises?
I love this filter because AI absolutely loves to generate sweeping, grandiose statements.
Oh, it loves them.
You know, like in today's ever-evolving digital landscape, synergizing cross-functional paradigms is paramount for sustainable growth.
Right.
If you sat down at a coffee shop with a friend who works in your industry and said that to their face, they would look at you like you were having a stroke.
They'd ask if you were okay. If you wouldn't say it to someone who can push back, it has no business being published under your name, no matter how professional or optimized it looks on the screen.
It's just noise.
Exactly. If the answer to these tests is no, if you realize you cannot defend the claims, and you would never speak the words in reality, the vital realization is that the problem isn't the AI's output. The problem isn't that you used the wrong prompt template.
The problem is the relationship you have developed with the tool.
Yes.
You treated the LLM as an oracle instead of an instrument.
Yeah.
You deferred to its judgment instead of exercising your own. You outsourced the most valuable, defensible part of the work, the hard, structural thinking.
Which brings us to the pivot.
The pivot. How do we fix this?
Well, if we realize we have been outsourcing our cognitive load, and we recognize that using AI to generate the first draft is actively weakening our defensibility, how do we shift that relationship? What is the actual productive role of these models if we shouldn't use them to generate the work?
This is where we have to flip the dynamic entirely. If the problem is that AI generation removes the friction of thinking, we have to deliberately reintroduce the friction.
Right.
And the sources suggest a shift that is conceptually very small, but practically profound. You have to start messy. Instead of staring at a blank page and asking the AI to give you an outline or a first draft, you have to do the initial heavy lifting yourself.
You must map out your own rough, incomplete thought process before you ever open the AI interface.
Which actually validates how real human thinking actually works. Real thinking isn't a perfectly formatted listicle. It's a mess.
It's a total...
You open a text document
Yeah.
and you just write down your raw, unstructured ideas. It might be a rant. It might be bullet points. It might be half sentences completely out of order. The goal is to get your actual unique logic, your standard deviation onto the page.
Once you have established that messy, deeply human structure, then you bring the AI into the workflow.
Ah, okay.
But you do not bring it in to write the draft or polish the prose. You bring it in to act as a red team. You use the AI to challenge your messy thinking, not to replace it.
You ask the AI to attack you.
Essentially, yes.
You feed it your messy notes, your half-baked logic, and you give it prompts like,
Yeah.
point out the weakest assumptions in my argument. Or find the logical contradictions between point A and point C.
Yes.
Or, my personal favorite, simulate a highly skeptical client who already has a vendor they like and tell me exactly how they would dismantle this proposal.
Yeah.
You are demanding that the AI break your argument apart so that you can find the stress fractures before the market does.
Look at how fundamentally that shifts the power dynamic.
It's completely reversed.
You are no longer sitting back, passively reacting to a wall of generated text, trying to edit it into something that vaguely sounds like your voice. You are actively shaping the ideas.
You're in control.
You are forcing the machine to react to your framework. The weight of the work moves entirely away from generation, which is a cheap commodity, and moves entirely onto judgment, which is the only scarce resource left.
When you use AI as a red team, you are constantly sharpening your judgment. The AI might point out a massive logical flaw in your pricing model that you hadn't considered. Now you have to think of a way to resolve that flaw.
Exactly.
The machine isn't doing the thinking for you. It is forcing you to think harder, faster, and from more adversarial angles than you could ever manage on your own. It acts as a sparring partner, not a surrogate brain.
And this explains the divide we are seeing in the market right now, because we all know professionals and agencies who are scaling massively using AI, and they aren't losing clients.
Right, their audiences aren't getting thinner.
Their code bases aren't collapsing. The difference isn't that they have access to some secret enterprise-level AI model that the rest of us don't. They are using the exact same underlying technology.
The difference is the structure of the workflow.
The difference is how the technology is positioned relative to the human's cognitive load. The ultimate reality of this landscape is that AI is not replacing people. That is a fundamental misdiagnosis of the threat.
So what is it actually doing?
AI is compressing everything in a workflow that does not require clear, original thinking. It is compressing the syntax generation, the boilerplate coding, the basic formatting, the structural summarization.
The busy work.
The busy work. And by compressing all of that mundane execution, it is leaving everything else, the strategy, the judgment, the unique point of view, the defensible logic, utterly exposed.
It's like the tide going out.
Yeah.
When the water was high, everyone looked exactly the same. The water was the sheer effort and time required just to generate acceptable professional output.
Yeah.
Now the AI has completely drained the water, and we can all see exactly who is standing on a solid rock of deep structural logic and who is just floating on the surface of good grammar and high volume.
That's a great analogy.
This is why some people are scaling effortlessly, because their core logic was always rock solid, and now they don't have to waste time on the formatting. But others, using the exact same tools, feel like they are drowning.
They're treading water.
They're working harder than ever just to stay in the exact same place because they were relying on the friction of generation to hide the fact that their underlying ideas were totally generic.
Which brings us back to that initial scenario, that quiet, unsettling feeling when the agency dashboard looks green, but the business feels incredibly fragile.
Yeah.
If you are operating a business or building an audience or writing software and you felt that something is slightly off lately, even when you have optimized every prompt and automated every workflow, you are not imagining it.
The signals are already there.
Yeah.
The lower quality leads, the quieter audience, the code that feels too heavy to touch, the clients who smile and nod and then leave.
You can't ignore it.
Producing more of the same output is not going to fix the structural decay. You cannot outvolume a lack of ownership.
The only way forward is to embrace the friction of thinking again. Let the models handle the compression of the mundane, but fiercely protect your ownership of the logic. Start messy, invite the critique, defend your claims. That is how you rebuild leverage in a system where generation is free.
If you are looking at your own workflow right now, maybe thinking about a project you have open in another tab, and someone actually wants to rebuild this properly, there's something in the description that walks through it in a structured way.